My name is David Rigberg. For those of you I haven't met yet or don't know, I'm the chair of the Medical Student and Resident Outreach Committee for the Society of Vascular Surgery. And we heard you, all of the rising MS4s or MS3s. We heard you and your concerns, and especially since the VAM meeting was canceled, and I know a lot of you might have gotten questions answered in that venue, we've decided to go ahead with this meeting and try to answer your questions as best we can about next year's match for 05 residencies. We've done this with the participation and co-branding with the SVS, the Association of Program Directors in Vascular Surgery, and the VESS, the Vascular and Endovascular Surgical Society. So we are three big organizations of vascular surgery that all want to look out for your futures and want to help you in any way you can. We've assembled this illustrious panel, and I really appreciate everyone who's participating. For some of the students who might not know everyone on this panel, myself excluded, this is a group of luminaries, well, and Dr. Wooster, this is a group of luminaries in vascular surgery, and I am very appreciative of their time and the sage advice and wisdom they're about to give. For those of you who are participating, keep in mind this is a fluid process, and we understand that as well. So we've added information just that we've received in the last couple of days even. So we'll try to share all that with you as well. And we also are going to post this, and then we plan on updating the information we get on this platform from time to time as the facts on the ground change with whatever we learned about the match. Many of you emailed me questions. I'll try to get those to the panelists after the presentations are done. If they don't get answered and you feel like I'm ignoring you, shoot me another email and remind me, although I've kept most of them, and I'll try to get them answered for you offline if need be. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the talks. The speakers you'll meet when they're introduced. And then we have some other people on here who are going to be serving on the panel, including Dr. Reed, who's the outgoing president of the APDVS. I will introduce other luminaries as they speak if for some reason they haven't given talks as well. So without any further ado, and in the interest of time, we can get started. Our first short presentation this morning is going to be by Drs. Sheahan and Dr. Mary Shames, sort of talking about the data behind the match, because those are a lot of the questions we receive are about how important it is to do different things, how many people apply, etc. So why don't Dr. Sheahan and Shames take it away.
Thanks, David. So we're just going to go over very briefly some of the data from the last few years' matches. All of this is publicly available. The AAMC, the NRMP distributes it, but it can be confusing because often it's not clear how many people actually applied, how many people did interviews, and how people are counted by the NRMP and by ERAS. So we're just going to break it down real quick to give you kind of a down and dirty on the most recent matches. So this is from the most recent match, and there are currently 59 integrated programs in the United States who offer 75 positions. In the most recent match, 73 of the 75 positions were filled initially out of 153 applicants. So if you want a breakdown of who actually got positions, you can see it's mostly U.S. seniors, 62 of them. There were 10 DOs in the most recent match, and 5 of them got an integrated vascular spot. There were a couple of residents who transferred, and about, I think it was 4 FMGs as well who got a position. So just looking at the last 3 years of data, you can see starting in 2018, the number of positions, which is in blue, has slowly risen over each of the last 3 years. We don't really know where this will be by the time you're applying, but we can assume it'll be at least 75, if not higher. The number of U.S. seniors who applied had stayed pretty stable up until this past match where we saw a nice jump, which is something we're trying to improve on is more U.S. seniors matching. So for us, it's good news. For you, maybe you don't want as many people in the match, but we'll see where that ends up. But we saw a nice jump from about 60 U.S. seniors, which is what we were seeing, to 82 in the most recent. And then the total number of applicants jumped this year to 153. So that includes foreign medical grads and DOs as well. So we had a robust number of applicants for 75 spots in the most recent match. So everybody wants to know, how many places do I need to apply to? How many positions? So this is from the program standpoint. So how many people do they need to interview and rank to fill a position? So the average number of people that I would need to rank to fill one of my positions would be anywhere from 4 to 6 over the last 3 years of data. So how you can use this information is if you see a program with one position and they're interviewing 40 people, that might not be the best use of your time, because the odds of matching there are pretty slim, because most people match about one applicant for every 4 to 6 people they interview. So you want to look at that as well, and kind of see if if a program's interviewing too many people. We try to interview about 10 per position. It usually ends up probably closer to 12, but anywhere in that range is something what you should be looking for as an applicant. So this is a bit confusing, but everybody wants to know, well, what does my step 1 score need to be? Basically, there is association but not correlation between step 1 scores. And what I mean by that is, yes, people with higher step 1 scores seem to do better in the match, but it's probably just an association, because people with higher step 1 scores also tend to do better in medical school. And that's really probably the true correlation. So nearly every AOA student who's been in the match has gotten an integrated position. But we all know, at least anecdotally, of a lot of applicants with step 1 scores in the 190s, low 200s, who've also matched. So you should not look at your step score as an absolute cutoff. I think very, very few programs do cutoffs for interviews based on step scores, because it's not general surgery. Most of us get about 100 applications, and we can look through that. It's not general surgery. We're getting several hundred, and they have to establish some kind of cutoff. So what this slide shows you is, don't let your step score freak you out. There is some association. So the people who did the worst, below 222, they had to have about 23 applications to get a reasonable chance at a match. And beyond 23, it really didn't make any difference in their chances of matching. Whereas people who did better, around 20 applications, and that was kind of the cutoff. More than that didn't really help them either. As far as number of places to interview, it would probably be less than this, because again, this is just applications. So the numbers do get confusing, but I think the take-home point from what they're showing you here is, don't let your step score freak you out. If you are still a good student, you're probably going to get a look. And from there, I think I'm going to turn this over to Dr. James.
Okay. Thanks, Mal. Thanks, Dave. And hi, everybody. There's a couple of things I wanted to bring up. One of our residents did a survey of applicants in 2018 match. So of the 58 people, 30% responded. And there were just a couple of questions that we asked. Almost everybody, about half the people had a vascular program at their institution, and half didn't. So it's okay if you don't have an integrated program at your institution. There are still plenty of opportunities. The majority of people did participate in the VSIG if available at their institution. The numbers of applications ranged from as few as 10 to as many as 50. And I think that's a 50 is an obscene number, and 10 probably means you're staying where you are. The number of invitations ranged from 1 to 45. Almost everybody did apply to general surgery, but I think if you're a strong applicant and you are getting interviews, 12 to 15 interviews, you probably don't need to go on very many, if any, general surgery interviews. Obviously, these are all that matched. What was interesting is we asked some questions. So the majority of people spent, the average was about $8,000 per applicant, expenditures to travel, so not insignificant. 61% would be amenable to video interviews, 78% would be amenable to a central site interview. 61% of people did feel that a site interview was helpful and thought it was critical to the match at that time. So I wanted to get into our current scenario. So the APDVS has kind of aligned with the Coalition for Physician Accountability, and this is sort of recommendations to all medical schools currently to really minimize the necessity, or actually even we were as strong as to say we should not offer sub-internship rotations to students at this time. That might change. Institutions have different rules. Locally at USF, we're not allowed to offer anything until October, and that date will probably change. Program directors should discourage their home institution students from pursuing away rotations unless absolutely necessary, in that you don't have a program at your institution. We should be flexible for the number of letters, so I think that's important. We're not going to mandate that you have to have a letter from an outside institution or a chairman in vascular surgery or even a program director in vascular surgery if you don't have that as an opportunity, but we would recommend that you really try and engage a local vascular surgeon or a vascular surgeon at another program who could help you through the way. There may be some delays in USMLEs, and we just probably won't look at that as much. Again, and with respect to interviews, I don't believe that we can say definitively, but we're going to recommend everybody be at least prepare to do virtual interviews, and that might become a requirement depending on what happens with COVID. And that's really all I had to say.
I believe next we'll be hearing from Dr. Aulivola from Loyola University Medical Center.
So I was asked to talk a bit about sub-Is, and Dr. Shames already mentioned a few of the restrictions that will be set out, but I know that there's been a lot of speculation and a lot of discussion about sub-Is. For third-year students, I know around this time of year, you're so excited to get a lineup of away sub-Is and visit outside institutions, and some of that will be different this year. It will be different than any other year that any of us on the panel have seen, with a lot of the aspects of the residency application process. So I think some clarity came this week when a multi-organization consensus statement came out. Dr. Shames mentioned some of that. So essentially, we have a whole bunch of organizations, the AAMC, the ACGME, LCME, our own program director association, that are setting out some pretty strict guidelines for sub-Is, and most of those are restricting away sub-Is. And as you can imagine, this is all being done in the interest of safety. But granted, you need to sort of consider maybe a different strategy in terms of how you're looking at the upcoming months and the beginning of your fourth year. So essentially, there'll be a very rare or small group of students who will be considered for away sub-Is, and that'll be mainly restricted to students, if there are any of those of you out there who do not have an opportunity for a vascular surgery rotation at your home institution. So that doesn't mean you have to have a residency at your home institution, but if you have access to vascular surgery sub-I or rotation at your home institution, you will basically be asked not to do away sub-Is. And then the only other exception to that away sub-I rule are those of you who have requirements by your medical school to do a specific away rotation as, a requirement for graduation. So the vast majority will not be doing away sub-Is this year. And we know that, all the program directors know that. For those who do meet the exemptions, there are also some guidelines in terms of restricting the number of away rotations that you do, and also ones that are geographically close. So your program directors and your faculty will not be encouraging you, they'll be discouraging you from going to do away sub-Is. So that being said, I think we need to think about what the purpose of a sub-I is. There may be a population out there that's listening on the attendee list that are still sort of on the fence in deciding whether to apply for vascular surgery. I've had students rotate with me who are in that July phase, sort of still deciding between maybe vascular, general surgery, or something else. And so for those students, spending time at your home institution on a sub-I will be very valuable in making that decision. And for those of you who are committed, you're ready to sign on the dotted line and join the field of vascular surgery, the sub-I has many benefits, not all of which include visiting in an outside site. So increasing your knowledge base, your sub-Is are helping you prepare to become a good intern next year, right? Increasing face time with faculty who will write you a good letter of recommendation. For many of you, that will happen at your home institution. A little bit later, I'm not going to steal the thunder, Dr. Pierce will talk about things relating to finding out about other programs without actually visiting. I know for many students, spending a month at another institution really lets you get to know that program and gets your foot in the door, or lets their faculty know you. But there are other ways of learning about each program, and so Dr. Pierce will talk about that. So the emphasis this year will be on making the most of your home sub-Is. I will say our own institution is thinking about ways of being flexible, since we have more students than sub-I positions, in opening up additional positions so that all of our students have the ability to do, a strong sub-I experience with us. And another thing to take into consideration is that ERAS is actually pushed back its timeline this year. So ERAS will open up applications for program directors to view on October 21st. So that sort of allows a little bit more time for those of you to get the sub-I experiences and get good letters of recommendation to sort of learn more about vascular surgery. But perhaps that means being a little more innovative and thinking about opportunities to do multiple sub-Is or maybe a vascular research elective or other things during the time that you, in your mind, were thinking you were visiting another site. So there's plenty more to talk about. Hopefully, if questions come up, we can answer those on the panel. Otherwise, I will pass it on to the next speaker.
All right, thank you so much. That was excellent. I know this is a huge area of concern for the students, and we'll certainly be coming back to this even after the talks in the panel. But that is a great transition. I believe Dr. Pierce is next on the list, and he's going to be addressing one of those concerns, which is what are your options if you're not doing a sub-I, essentially. Ben?
Thanks, David, and thanks to everybody for your time and for letting me be here to discuss this. I hope everybody's feeling well. So I'm going to jump right in. As I was kind of thinking about this, I thought, what would I do? Of course, being an old fogey and not knowing, the first thing I did is just went to the websites. And it seems kind of antiquated nowadays to say go to the websites, but I know most of us have put in a lot of effort into our websites. And I actually learned a lot going through them. In fact, I learned that one of Mal's chief residents likes to eat her cereal with Mountain Dew. And while it sounds silly, when you find a website, and I know we do this on ours as well, that has their trainees, their current trainees on it, and you can kind of see who they are and where they're from, I actually find that to be extremely useful in trying to understand a place. You might see somebody there that went to your med school and you had no idea. I mean, it's been 5 years since that person graduated or 7 years since that person graduated, but you realize that might be somebody you have a tie to that you could reach out and find out about a place. Those sort of like neat little personal details I think are something that they can teach you something about a place that you usually would get by going and sitting down and meeting with the trainees during an interview. And so that's a great place to start, I think, is the website. Email for me is the most consistent means of communication. I would suspect that all the panelists have very similar sort of life to mine, which is I am almost never in the office. I almost never can receive a phone call. But as soon as I get out of the OR or if I get out of clinic, I can pull out my phone and look at my email. And in fact, it's been a lot of fun the last several weeks. I've had emails from prospective students. I've set up Zooms and I've spent 20 minutes doing a video Zoom with people who are interested in applying to vascular surgery. Some are just trying to decide if it's the right thing to do or not. But I have some time on my hands right now to do those sorts of things since we're not super busy. And so I think emailing, a lot of times it's best maybe to go through the coordinator that's identified at the website, but you can certainly email me directly. And the other thing, when you email, I would ask for the email of a couple of the current trainees that you could even contact with. Again, I think that's the hardest thing about actually not, the interview days. I like people to come and interview here because I think our city happens to be a place many people haven't been, and it's actually a beautiful town and community that people may not know much about. But otherwise, we're just showing you a tour of a hospital and an OR, and quite frankly, you get that everywhere. And what you really want to do is sit down and spend time with the people, especially the people who are the current trainees, because that's who you want to be. And so trying to get in touch with some of the current trainees, I think, is really important. The other is the whole no sub-I thing has just come out recently on Monday, and we're still kind of all reacting. But I know that we're going to try to put together some virtual sub-Is, if you will, some sort of teaching conferences or things that we run with our people at our place and invite prospective applicants to log on and participate. And so start looking for those sorts of opportunities. I think you're going to see a lot more of those coming out. And the last thing I'll say is that the geographic location to some degree matters. If there's a place that you have family ties or you visited, you can probably reliably get some idea of whether that's somewhere you'd want to spend 5 to 7 years. If you've never been somewhere before, find somebody who has and make sure that that's a place that you think you could be. I did my residency in Chicago, having never lived anywhere outside of the U.S. South before, but that's where my maternal grandparents are from. And I had spent a lot of time there as a kid, and I knew that I would be able to live in that town, and it was a really great adventure, and I'm really grateful for having had the opportunity to do that. And I might not have otherwise gone there or somewhere so remote to where I was from if I hadn't had some connection to the area. So I would think about those things as well. But the good news is I think that you'll find that the actual interview day, it's getting to know the people is the most important thing, and we have the means and the technology to get around that. And then, like I said, I'll leave it to John next to talk about how to get letters. But if you email and reach out to people trying to find out about it, and you spend time talking to us and do some virtual visits, when you do those things, ask about letters and those sorts of things. I think those are going to be very important. And with that, I'll segue into John's part of the panel. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Ben. I didn't know you'd ever been out of the South except for meetings, so that was extremely informative to me. That was excellent. So we've got Dr. John Rechtenwald next from the University of Wisconsin. He's going to be speaking to us about getting letters if you can't visit a place, which again, along with the question just what to do about sub-Is, that's been the question emailed me to the most, is how do we get these letters? And we also recognize that there are plenty of you who are at programs where you don't think there's a big vascular presence, and so hopefully we'll cover how to get letters in that situation as well. So take it away, John.
So let me ask a quick question first of the panelists. So how many of y'all think you're actually going to be able to offer any fourth years a sub-internship next year? Because my institution said no, period, end of sentence, for a couple of reasons, not the least of which is, our medical students right now are at home. So, we got to kind of have to catch up on their surgical experience for next year. But I think that's, so I think, doing a sub-I is not really going to happen for most people. And in my opinion, the only couple of reasons to do a sub-I is, one, if you think that, you want to go to a program where maybe you don't feel like your CV is quite good enough, and you show up there and you work your tail off and you shine and you make quite a good impression. And the other reason is, like what Ben just said, to see, can I live here? Is this a place for me that I can be? And to be honest, if you're worried about that, take a vacation. Go there for, you'll spend more time in that, in the place where you might be interested in. You spend a week there than one night. So in terms of getting letters, I think, if you're at an institution where you have a strong vascular presence, getting a letter from, let's say, Dr. Shames or Sheahan or Reed or Coleman, you probably don't really need a letter from them if you have a place that's, you've got a lot of vascular surgeons there, got a strong vascular presence. The issue may be if you're from, I was talking to somebody who's from a smaller school in Georgia who, they have a couple of vascular surgeons, but, they're not very academic. They don't know a lot of people out in academic institutions where this person might want to apply. Kind of a special circumstance. And what I would say for people in that situation is, there's a lot of people here sitting on these panels. We have the opportunity to go even virtually to, let's say, the Midwestern Vascular Surgery Society meeting or the SVS or, something, even a statewide meeting, and you can meet some people. I would get their numbers and I would conference with them. I would talk to them. I would make them your mentor. And they would be able to write you a letter, potentially. And they could write you a letter that, says, I've met with this person several times. They are 100% in, on vascular surgery. They want to be vascular surgeons. I've talked to the folks at their institution and they have the right stuff to be a vascular surgeon. They can write that letter. The thing they'll be lacking is actual, observation of you in the clinical environment, in the operating room. But again, they can, write you a letter by proxy for the people after they talk to people who actually have seen you in the operating room or have seen you take care of patients and seen you present patients. So, that would be my advice to you. Again, it's not perfect by any means, but everybody is going to be in the same boat. So you're not going to be at a disadvantage. And with that, that's about all I have to say on the subject. It's, meet people, meet faculty, try to engage them. And I think it's completely reasonable that, they could write you a very good letter that may help.
Thank you very much, John. That's great. And, the point he made that I really want you all to remember is this is not a situation where there's some exception that's being made for you. It's not like you've had a personal illness or a family problem that you feel needs to be explained so people will understand. If a program you're applying to hasn't heard about this COVID-19 problem, I wouldn't recommend going there. So most of us are aware that there's a problem, and as much as you're worrying about it, we're sitting here thinking about how we're going to deal with the problem and how we're going to get through this next season for the match. So anyway, thank you so much, Dr. Rechtenwald. We're going to transition over to Dawn Coleman. Dr. Coleman is on the short list of people I'm pretty sure I will someday be working for, and she is going to be talking to us about what programs look for in an application.
Thanks, David. Hi, everybody. I want to say one thing before I kind of dive into what we look for. And that's simply that everybody right now is in exactly the same boat. And you're all probably feeling some angst. And frankly, we're all feeling a little bit of angst because everything's very different very quickly. I would like to reassure everybody that's participating in this call, and please spread the word. The group of people on this call and educators across the country right now trying to recruit you into vascular surgery are deeply committed to your success. Even the people that we don't know, right? So I don't know how to say it any differently to suggest that we have been actively working to identify future vascular surgeons and bring you into our fold. And so you've got a group of individuals across the country really thinking about this at a high level on how to outreach to those of you that need that outreach and how to make sure that we're not missing talent. And so I'm kind of optimistic that this exercise and this process that we're going to be working through together is going to allow us some innovation and some change maybe that may linger some of the principles, even hopefully after we don't have COVID lingering. But I was charged to talk to you about what programs are looking for in an applicant. And I'll suggest to you that it's a bit of a loaded question. And if anybody knew the answer, I think it would be a pretty high impact paper because we're all discussing with some regularity what are the building blocks that make the most successful candidate. And I'll suggest that sometimes the classically top candidates that we're all noticing on the interview trail, sometimes they disappoint us. And sometimes there are these really unassuming candidates that just knock it out of the park and we watch them and we say, wow. And so I think our goal as program directors is to bring somebody into our vascular surgery family that integrates well with the team, that is teachable, that's going to take really great care of the patients, and that requires a lot of human skills. And then we want to avoid attrition. And at Michigan, we want to train academic vascular surgery leaders. And I think that one of the areas that we've put a lot of effort in as an institution is focusing also on really creating a powerful, diverse team, not just across our faculty, but across our learners. So we're intentionally looking for people who are coming from different backgrounds with different areas of experience and expertise, coming from different institutions and parts of the country. And we're looking for folks with different strengths and different academic interests and goals. And so that's a lot to try to capture from an ERAS application and a 30-minute interview. I would say that I kind of hope that some of these challenges we're exploring levels the playing field for a lot of applicants, because I think we're going to have to be really, really careful when we look at our applicant pool and really, really intentional at seeking out those surrogate markers that sometimes we feel like we understand how to capture. And for all of you as you're navigating through this process, and I apologize, it's just unclear to me how many on the call are actually in the application state and how many perhaps are earlier in their training and are still just flirting with the idea of being a vascular surgeon. I think we owe all of you a lot, and we're going to work towards that. But when you think about your application process, there are kind of 4 phases. There's a pre-application process, and we've spent a lot of time talking about that. That has to do with all of the networking and the mentoring relationships that you've been actively growing. It has to do with the relationships you've been building with your research experiences, if you have those. It has to do with your away rotations and what that new experience looks like in this era. But essentially, we want to see through all of this that you have a commitment, a sound commitment to being a vascular surgeon, because it's a big hat to wear. And then you've got your application process that we're going to tease out from your ERAS application. Your USMLE scores, I think somebody asked earlier if there were strict cutoffs, and I think that's different at different institutions. But I'll suggest that I am unaware of a consistent criteria that would be kind of a hard go or no go across an institution across the country. But we're looking for your research productivity. We're looking for human civil service. We're looking for, through your letters of recommendation and through your personal statement, for surrogate markers that matter to us. We're looking for personality traits that imply honesty and humility, a work ethic and discipline. We're looking for your own emotional intelligence, which is kind of a loaded area to talk about, but we want to feel really comfortable that we're bringing in individuals that have some self-awareness and empathy and are able to work as a team and have communication skills and have demonstrated some leadership to date so that they can be coached even further. I suspect, and I don't know, that at least across general surgery programs and maybe some of our vascular programs, there are specific scales or rubrics that are being employed. I'm not aware of any that are really widely and largely validated and linked to actual surrogates of success. And so we're not employing any of those scales. And I'd also suggest that in the space of emotional intelligence, a lot of those skills can be coached. So I think it ends up being more of an opportunity for professional development and retention, if anything. But that's what we're trying to glean through some of those more subjective areas of your ERS application. And then during your interview, I think probably some situational judgment tests and prefabricated questions that are a little bit more standardized this year will be important. And we're thinking about what our interview platform is going to look like and how we're going to navigate that. There were some questions floating around about whether we thought there would be more interviews offered since they are likely going to be mainly virtual, and I don't know how to answer that. At least at a home institutional level, we are just starting to kind of think about this at a high level within departmental oversight. And so alongside a few other surgical programs, we're going to try to tease out what we think are going to be best practices at our home center, but we're going to look at our higher educational leadership bodies like the APDVS and the Vascular Board for guidance. And then I think post-interview and during your interview, what really can't be overemphasized, and somebody touched on it already, is the interaction you have with the trainees. You guys really need that, and we want you to have that because you'll have a good understanding of an institution's strengths and weaknesses, their culture, in interfacing with those trainees. And to be really honest, I care deeply about how my residents and fellows feel about you when you come to visit. And if there's concern that that integration is going to be really, really challenging, our house officers have a voice in our rank list, and we're pretty transparent in that regard. And so I think there are a lot of really great programs out there, and there are program directors and faculty across the country really excited to train up the next generation. We have to be creative this year, and I think it'll allow us an opportunity to expand on areas of kind of remote or micro mentoring where we're building up relationships coming into this summer and fall and intentionally allowing opportunities for your engagement with our programs. And that may look different by center. We're going to feel that out together. We'd really welcome your thoughts on how we can do that. And we'll be working with our residents here to understand how we can make that outreach effective and allow the interested applicants a view of what our program looks like. And so I think there's going to be a lot more to come, and your voices matter. And I think it's going to be okay. And we'll kind of work through this together. So I'm super glad. I feel like I saw over 140 students on this call. That's pretty awesome. And I want to thank David Rigberg and the team for putting this together with such a collaborative lens and for the opportunity to be a part of this team.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Coleman. Before we get into the last formal presentation by Dr. Wooster, I'm going to throw a question out there to the audience. And Adam, maybe you can help figure out how to pull these results. But it's an interesting question is, of this people that are out there listening right now, how many of you are rising MS4s who have already decided that you are going to apply for a 05 vascular residency? I guess here's a quick poll you already put together. What level of training are you? And then the second question would be, how many of you have already picked that you're definitely applying to vascular? So maybe people can ponder this and try to figure out how to work their computers or wake up or whatever is going on out there in the audience. And Dr. Wooster can get started before we go to the panel.
Thanks. Hey, everybody. I'm happy to be part of this. It's really a great opportunity to get to reach out to so many of you and so many people, especially at this hour on a Wednesday afternoon or Wednesday evening, depending on what coast you're on. Just sort of my 2 cents before I even talk about virtual interviews is just the philosophy of mindset you should have right now. I think a lot of people see this as a black mark on our interview season and a black mark on education in general. And it's not. This is actually a time for a lot of us to get creative and think outside the box and come up with new ways to connect, to communicate, and to learn from each other. And so this is actually a really exciting time to be interviewing. I think you're going to see a lot of people without having sub-Is applying to places they otherwise wouldn't have. I think if virtual interviews happen, you're going to see people interviewing at places they wouldn't have. And so this may actually expand the box even more so than it's worsening it the way that people think it's going to. So keep an open mind and stay positive through all of this. Will virtual interviews happen? We don't know for sure. The answer is most likely. The way things are looking, they probably will. Whether it's only virtual or that's a supplementation, we don't know. But it never hurts to get used to it. The reality is telecommunication is the wave of the future. It'll help reduce costs for everybody. It helps reduce travel time, reduces the burden on you as an individual. So I personally hope that it does happen, at least to a certain extent. So how do you do it? Well, first off, remember, you're not just sitting at home on your computer. This is still an interview. So dress professionally. Act like you're going to be at an interview. Do your research just like you would for a normal interview. Be prepared with questions. Be prepared with answers for the common things that you'll get asked. Get used to the mobile platform. So you look around and you can see all the different panelists. We all look a little different right now. You guys can see which one of us you think look professional and which one of us you think don't. You'll be judged in the exact same way. Your lighting, your backdrop, all of this matters. And so for somewhat informal meetings, it's irrelevant. But if you're going to go through the formal interview process, think about creating a space in your home or your office, wherever you're going to be, where number one, it's quiet. And number two, you can create a clean background. You have lighting so that you don't look like a ghoul. All right. Test it out with other friends. Talk to your family, talk to your friends, do web conferences just so you can get comfortable talking into space and not having the immediate feedback of somebody's head nodding or their shoulders shrugging or them leaning in to listen to you. It's just a slightly different interaction. And the emotional intelligence that Dr. Coleman alluded to has to do with your ability to interact with humans socially face to face. And this is a different way to do it without that immediate feedback. So just practice. Simple things, disable your notifications, try to get rid of your email pop-ups that would come up and interrupt your chat and adjust you. And then again, just practice. Start talking like this. It's a great way to stay in touch with friends and family. I can tell you personally, I have a niece and nephew that live in Baltimore. I haven't seen them in a few months now. It's a great way to practice. I talk to them via webcam all the time. And so you can get comfortable with your voice, you can get comfortable with your posturing, so you can tell if you're slouching and have people tell you whether or not that's going on. But again, at the end of this, we'll all take questions. I want to sort of end it so we have plenty of time for that, because I think the most important part of a session like this is to hear what you guys have to say. So with that, I'll end my portion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wooster. Dr. Wooster, would you say there's anything more professional looking than giant Boss headphones covering your ears?
Well, I would say the sound of a Peloton in the background is more professional.
Nicely played. So, Adam, do we have some poll results? So what level of training are you? Okay, so we have a surprising mix, actually, which is good to see. Most of you are third years, as I would assume, but a lot of fourth years as well, and some others as well. So keeping in mind that only 53% of our respondents are in the spot where they would be applying, let's see what the answer to our next poll question is. So that's a little scary. We've got more people that applying to vascular next year that are not third-year medical students currently than there will be next year. So those of you who are applying as second-year medical students next year, do not be disappointed when you don't match. I think we will be keeping all those requirements the same. So anyone who has questions now, please type them in. I'm going to go to the full panel now with some questions that have been coming in by email and by the webinar itself. So I have a question for, we'll start with Dr. Reed. Any data considering whether any integrated programs that will not be participating in the 2021 application cycle? I'm personally not aware of any programs being adversely affected to the point that they're not participating in the upcoming year, but anyone else have any other information regarding that?
Thanks, Dave. I don't know that there are any currently in a bad situation or not accepting applicants or things like that. The data that we had from the recent integrated match really shows pretty full participation. There was a question on the Q&A early on about whether there will be more spots coming up as the interview season rolls out, and the programs do have to apply. There's about a 6-month process programs go through. The RRC will only meet one more time before the interview sessions start. So the likelihood is low that there would be many more positions. I'm not aware of any that are currently in process, but if there is a program applying that would be looked at, say, in early summer, they have to also be able to interview and do all those things. So likely the number of positions will stay stable, but most integrated programs and the slots that were put up earlier are really all in good shape and should be accepting applicants.
So here's a question that actually anyone on the panel, please feel free to jump in, because it's certainly not a yes/no type question. How will programs take into account changes to the grading system? So a number of schools have changed from, in the past either having letter grades or high pass, honors, et cetera, to a strictly pass-fail. Clearly, as program directors, that'll be something, that's one less metric we may have in figuring out what to do with candidates. But this is a question just to the panel, if anyone has thought about this and what kind of advice they might give or what their thoughts are on this topic.
I'll jump in, David. When I look at
anybody but Ben, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, my bad. Of course. When I look at their med school record, I feel like I get the most information from the dean's letter summary. There's usually aggregated comments from each rotation that kind of augment the high pass stuff. And then usually there's a really nice summary from the dean's office themselves at the end of it. And so I think that even though they may switch to a pass or a pass-fail sort of situation, you're still going to get those free text box evaluations of students that I think are still going to be really important. So, doing a great job on your rotations is going to still come through, I think, in the application.
Yeah, I think it's important for the audience out there to know, just like we all get together for something like this, we all know each other on a first-name basis. All the program directors, either through the SVS, the APDVS, the VESS, whatever. We all are friends. Believe it or not, we're all kind of friendly with one another. And so,
I thought you were Shahid for the longest time, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Not a bad person to be.
Yeah.
But there's a community of us, and we advocate for our medical students or our general surgery residents that are going into a fellowship. We take pride in getting our residents we produce and the medical students we've produced, to getting them out into the world and sort of showing off the job we did and training you as students. And so you've got many advocates out there that are going to be looking out for you. This is a little bit of a related question, and again, anyone can jump in. Do program directors expect a greater reliance on standardized exam scores and regional preferences in the upcoming application cycle? I think we've sort of answered that. Particularly the second part of the question is a no. We'll try to still keep eyes and minds wide open. And as Dr. Wooster said, you might end up wanting to apply somewhere that's way out of your comfort zone due to the Zoom style interviews. But anyone have any thoughts on that, on reliance on standardized tests more than things we relied on in the past?
I'll comment on that. I think that's becoming a thing of the past. Last I heard, they were debating whether or not to make the USMLE1 a pass-fail exam. So, I mean, that's going to go away, and we're just going to have to use other criteria to evaluate applicants.
That actually is going to be pass-fail, and I think it's 2021 when those scores will no longer be available. But I think to Dr. Coleman's point earlier is looking for a compilation of things, and no one's going to just look at scores. The scores, though, just give an idea that are you going to be able to pass certain standardized examinations. So it's certainly the whole answer for a good applicant is never just in the scores. So it's one piece of the puzzle. And I think making it sort of a pass-fail, programs will look for other things, the interview situation and letters, that type of thing. I just want to make a quick plug for anybody that's on for students. Obviously, many are in their own VSIGs, their vascular surgery interest groups. If you go to vascular.org and type in VSIG, VSIG for a search, you're going to come up with all of there's a contact person you can email and click on. And there were some questions about how people could connect virtually during this time. That's an option too. Maybe join somebody else's VSIG if you don't have one at your own place. But all of those are listed for all of our programs and easy to click on and connect.
Thank you. This question has now come up a couple of times. People asking about, particularly if they've had a rotation they're going to have to make up for whatever reason during COVID, they weren't able to do it. So there's sort of a general question, should people focus on finishing, when things open back up, finishing their required clerkships or trying to get some more experience in vascular? And then sort of on top of that question, will the completed ARS application this year require that all of the core clerkships be completed before they can apply, which is sort of along the same line. So this sounds like the kind of thing either Dr. Reed or Mal kind of lays awake at night worrying about these type of things. But anyone who wants to jump in on there.
I don't know. ERAS, it's changing. We just got a delay in some of the dates. I just got an email that some of the other dates are going to be delayed. So we don't know. I would say that for vascular surgery, your number one thing to do in the first couple of months of your fourth year is get your letters in line, figure out, where you're going to rotate, especially if your surgery rotation was cut short by COVID. You need to get some clinical time with the vascular surgeons at your institution, get strong letters from them. After that, things that of the core curriculum in your third year, those core grades, I know for some, they probably go into determining AOA status, which helps as well, as I already mentioned. I mean, everybody's trying to be as lenient as possible. Our school did not postpone any clinical rotation, so I'm not sure how many people that affects. But it's still a very, very much ongoing effort to try to figure all this out. The AAMC website is pretty good about compiling these updates, so I would urge you to look at that too. But your number one goal is get your letters in line early on in your fourth year.
I would totally agree. I think you still proceed sort of as business as usual from a student standpoint with your letters and application, and don't fret so much about the dates, because those are going to change as the pandemic and things change. But you don't want to stop in getting the process done and completed. I was also going to add to Dr. Worcester's comments about interviewing. Probably more of the students on the call know than probably us as panelists, and we've sort of floated this about a year ago about doing structured medical student interviews. And some of you as students may know about this, where there's actually sort of standardized medical student interviews, and some of the other specialties, emergency medicine is one, actually use virtual interviewing, and they've really verified that it's a reasonable way. So it's been going on for a few years. So you might want to, if you're not familiar with that, you may want to look in your own medical school as to some of these that are going on. They're very structured questions. And while we're in our infancy of doing that from an interviewing process, some specialties do a lot of it. And so you can gain some tips from that. And it's been written about and validated. And those are not, this is certainly not brand new, but all those tips about the background, dressing professionally, answering appropriate questions, not being distracted, they're all there.
So someone asked, does it hurt if your school does not have AOA? I don't think that's particular to the COVID pandemic this year, but certainly a fair question to ask people involved as program directors. I know at UCLA, if your school does not have an AOA chapter, we're certainly not going to hold that against you. And we can do the math. I mean, we can look at your grades from medical school and figure out most of them, even if they don't have an AOA, your dean's letter will include a scale and where you rank in your class in terms of grades and things of that nature. So really not a negative for us. Bernadette, you have any thoughts on that?
I think exactly what you're saying. Program directors can look at the application and get a sense for where you fall within your medical school class, and put together all the other things that are important in terms of selecting individuals for interviews. And so it's not just one thing. So I would agree with David that I don't think that that's something I would be concerned about, nor is it something that you have control over at this point. I did want to point out that Jesse's on the panel and hasn't had an opportunity to say anything. And
I was saving the hard questions for him at the end.
Thank him for coming, but I'm wondering if we should all throw a really tough question at Jesse, or ask if you have any input or things that you've been thinking about you can contribute from your standpoint to the students who are on the line.
Well, thank you for having me. I feel horrible for all the students who are just in this kind of weird in between of not sure what's going on, and I've been trying to field some questions from students who have contacted me. I think a lot of the things have been reiterated is that everyone in this panel and all the program directors I had the fortune of meeting on interviews and conferences, they really do care, and they want the best for you, and the best for you means the best for their program. So I don't really think that there's too many things to worry about in terms of reaching out to every single person or visiting towns just so you can sneak up on the people as they're walking to their car and telling them they're interested. If you're interested, they'll know. And if your application shows it, that's even better. But I think as a DO student, or as a DO graduate now, I can say, which is weird to say still, I went into this process thinking that I would be discriminated against and I wouldn't really have as many opportunities as others. And in some ways that proved to be true, but I was really, really pleased in how I was approached and how people treated me. And I feel like everyone, no matter what background you're coming from, if you're interested in and you're motivated and you're really dedicated to being a master surgeon, things will work out, whether that's through the integrated route or whether that's through the fellowship route. So if anyone has specific questions, I'd be happy to answer. I know this is more of a time for program directors, but you can always email me. It's my name at Gmail, or you can find me on Twitter, just my name. So be happy to answer anything or talk on the phone with you.
Have you binged any good TV in the last couple of weeks? Because I'm sort of running out of stuff.
I've been rewatching
My wife
Scrubs.
says I'm not allowed to play guitar 11 hours a day anymore, so I'm trying to...
I've been rewatching Scrubs, which is like my favorite TV show ever. And I have like a whole new perspective on the show now. And there's a ton of vascular references. So I've been like screenshotting those and saving them when I have good lines to bring up. So
the creepy doctor, the actor that's in all the Oliver Stone movies, he sat down next to me once at a restaurant, at like a counter place, a diner, and he had a newspaper. I said, "Hey, can I look at your sports page?" And he looked at me, looked at his paper, and said no. And then just sat there awkwardly so I don't like him. But anyway, that's really, I feel like we're off on a tangent now.
Can I redirect you?
Yes, you may redirect me.
Can I put in a little shameless plug here? Someone had asked and I answered. All of us on this panel, as well as other vascular surgeons in the country, are thinking about ways of getting students engaged and keeping you engaged throughout the course of this, upcoming year. And so a number of national and regional societies that typically have medical student programs are thinking about ways of translating that to a virtual platform. So I know that doesn't exactly replace it, but David and I, who work on the Resident and Student Outreach Committee for the SVS, are in the process of establishing a series of talks in June that will replace the programming that those of you who would have attended the vascular annual meeting would have had. So a session with a number of individuals, opportunities to ask questions, learn more about vascular surgery, etc. I know the Midwest Vascular is doing a similar thing. Now that can't translate all of the skills component of that virtually, or maybe we can figure out a way to do that. We're an innovative group. But I would say look at your regional society where you are. Each region has a vascular society, and look at the national societies. And we will be doing our best to send out information about those opportunities to keep you all engaged while we are trying to do these things remotely. So just keep an eye out for that. Also, I don't work for Audible Bleeding and I don't get any sort of royalties, but Audible Bleeding is a wonderful podcast where you can hook into information about all aspects of vascular surgery, how the field is being changed, and hear very insightful conversation by leaders in the field of vascular surgery. So just keep those things in mind as ways to stay connected as you work through your application process this year, or for those of you who are at other levels, to stay connected with the field of vascular surgery. We're a very welcoming group, and we have your best interests in mind.
So thank you, Bernadette. As I just said, not only for the people that were going to attend the BAM, but because it's now going to be an online forum, you will all be invited to attend these sessions. It's going to be broken down to sessions for MS1, MS2, MS3, MS4, and then for any general surgery residents. And the focus of these, unlike answering questions about the pandemic, is really, why should I do vascular surgery? And it's a great forum, again, with some presentations and then a discussion. So I fear we are running out of our time now. I really want to, from the bottom of my heart, thank all of the panelists for being here. I know everyone's busy with a million different Zoom things and everything else. And so we are very much appreciative of your time and the effort you put into this. For all of the participants, if you need to reach out, I know you're all given my email address, feel free, and I will do my best to answer any of your questions. Please don't send emails that say second notice or second attempt. I tend not to answer those ones, but I will get to your emails. And we want to try to make this process work as well as possible for you. We really all have your best interests at heart. And we're hoping that someday we can look back at this, at your class of, what year will that be? 2025 or whatever year the graduation will be, 2026. And we can look back at this and know that we all weathered the storm and produced a great class of newly minted vascular surgeons. So thank you all very much. Anyone from the panel have anything to add?
Also go to vascular.org and you can sign up for free to be part of all of this sort of thing from the SVS. And that includes a lot of all the information on the student residency groups as well.
And I'll throw one more thing out there is when you get your invitations, so those of you who are going to attend the VAM will get invitations to these these webinars that are coming up, if you can share them with your school's VSIG, because we don't necessarily have contacts for people who are interested in vascular surgery but hadn't applied to the VAM or anything else. So these will be, again, there will be no cost involved, so feel free to share these with your VSIG and everything else. There will be no breakfast provided, and in fact, they will be at night this year rather than breakfast sessions, as much as I look forward to getting at 3:30 in the morning LA time to talk at a breakfast session in Toronto, Canada, and this year we'll have to do it from home. So anyway, unless anyone else from the panel has anything else to add, thank you to our friends at Audible Bleeding, thank you to the VESS, thank you to the APDVS, thank you to our continued support from the Society of Vascular Surgery, and we hope to see you all in person at some time in the not too distant future.